You'd think that someone who's been the England vice-captain, twice manager of England on Australian tours, chairman of selectors and chairman of the TCCB itself, no less, should have a pretty good idea about what goes on in cricket. Similarly, you'd think that someone who's made his debut for Essex as long ago as 1947, captained the county throughout the 50s, and who's now in his second term as chairman of the club, should know quite a lot about Essex cricket in particular. And when that person is Doug Insole, both assumptions would be absolutely correct. I'd like to get the nuts and bolts of Douglas John Insole's career out of the way immediately. A Cambridge Blue in 47, 48 and 49 when he captained the side. Essex from 1947 to 1963, including the captaincy between 1950 and 1960. And 9 tests in 5 series between 1950 and 1957. 25,241 first-class runs at an average of 37.61, with 54 centuries and 1,000 runs a season 13 times, 138 wickets at 33.91, and 366 catches, as well as 6 stumpings. Now, the reason I wanted to get that out of the way, impressive as that career is by any standards, is that all the reference books list Doug Insole's attributes with adjectives like unorthodox, attacking, humorous, rugged, and resourceful. Doug, all that suggests to me that for someone who's held the highest offices in the cricketing land, you've always regarded this as a game to be enjoyed, rather than adopting the attitude of life and death pomposity, which regrettably so often goes with positions of power.
Well, yeah. I came into it because I enjoyed it. I'm in it now because I enjoy it. And, when I cease to enjoy it, I shall certainly go out of it. But when I started with Essex, for example, enjoyment was very much part of the theme because Tom Pearce was running the thing. But subsequently, we had to play in a way which was enjoyable because we hadn't got the talent to, make our way any other way. So it's always been part of my philosophy, I must say.
How did you first get into cricket?
Usual way, schoolboy. Played for London boys and Essex boys when I was 12 or whatever. Then the war, and I was evacuated, came back, started playing for Chingford and played for odd representative sides, went in the army. Played a few games in the army, came out, went up to Cambridge and started playing there.
It all sounds very easy and straightforward, but didn't you have to fight somewhere along the way to make the openings, get in?
Yeah, it was all a big struggle for me because, as you've said, and perfectly rightly, I was never orthodox. People never believed I could bat, and certainly when I started playing representative cricket, I used to cut by holding the bat on a slant, and I never had any coaching up to that point at all. So somebody taught me in my first game in an Essex trial how to cut. But when I first played for London, for example, I batted number 10 and fielded cover, and I was telling my grandson the other day, I was showing him a press cutting. There were 4 run-outs on the Surrey side, all of which were down to me, but I still batted number 9 or 10 or whatever. And gradually worked my way up by getting a few runs.
Who were the influential figures in your career at that time?
I don't think really anybody in particular, because there was no sort of coaching as such at school. My old man was always, very encouraging, very keen, immensely keen. I used to think sometimes a bit too keen, but enormously encouraging to me. But he was no great cricketer. He was just an enormous sports enthusiast.
School at Walthamstow, was it always destined that you were going to play for Essex?
Well, I supported Essex from the time I started taking an interest in cricket, which I suppose when I was 4 or 5. The first international series I was interested in was the Bodyline series. And I remember listening to those at 6:15 in the morning and hearing that rotten Dureski Miners signature tune coming over and wasting half the quarter of an hour they used to give us. But I was born in Middlesex, but only really had any early interest in Essex.
And then you went up to Cambridge and first-class cricket began for you.
Yeah, I had some nets early on in the season and was not regarded terribly highly, so they stuck me in the second team and I got some runs there. And when an opening appeared in the university side, I got into there. It was against Yorkshire. I do remember that very well. And I got 40-odd and was run out. I still don't think I was run out, but I got 40-odd and I was run out. And then things seemed to go not too badly from then on.
The fact that you started in the second 11 and you said you were unorthodox, do you think that you would have been able to make the same progress today as you did it at that time? Because that was really the right sort of time for an unorthodox player to progress, wasn't it?
Well,
what I'm saying is cricket, it wasn't so stereotyped then.
no, but because there was a lot more variety, it was possible to have many more weaknesses, and I certainly had weaknesses. I mean, because I played across the line, I was a good player of in-swing bowling and a good player of off-spinners, but I wasn't anything like as good against away swingers and leg spinners and orthodox left-armers, of whom there were plenty. So one had to, organise a technique to play those.
And presumably with that style, you depended on fairly good surfaces on which to play.
Well, one would have liked them, but, I mean, one hears a lot these days about uneven bounce and all this jazz, but in fact, Essex wickets were always park wickets. They were always fizzing all over the place. And if you look back at the scores in the 50s and you look at grounds like the Oval and so on and so forth, you'll see that people were getting 6 for 19 and matches were over in a day and 2 days and so on and so forth. So obviously one preferred even surfaces, but they weren't always there. And in fact, when we had a pretty strong side, our strongest sort of period in international cricket was the late 50s, really, 54-5 through to the end of that decade. If you look at the number of hundreds scored in first-class cricket, they were very tiny indeed. I mean, bowlers were on top, and we had a very good attack, and that's probably why we're winning our matches.
Who were your contemporaries at Cambridge?
Well, Trevor Bailey, obviously. We played in the soccer side in our first term. I didn't know him at all then, but obviously we got to know each other very well. He was the most prominent of those in my first 2 years. I suppose John Dews was there, who got an England side. Hubert Doggett appeared in the second year. And then the third year I was skipper and John Waugh came, so we had Dews, Doggett and Waugh in the side, and that was quite a useful side. But those were the main ones.
Good side to listen to, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, bags of talking, yeah. Yes, it was a great season, 1949, I must say. We had a very, very congenial cricket side at the university, and we enjoyed ourselves immensely. We beat Oxford, who, in fact, were the only team in England to beat the tourists that year, and they'd beaten just about everybody else. And that's the object of the exercise when you're at university, so all in all, it went very well.
And was captaincy something that had always appealed to you?
I seem to get shoved into it rather than volunteer for it. I mean, yes, it always appeals because you're always thinking about the game and wondering who should be doing what and so on and so forth. But I never consciously set out to be captain any more than I consciously set out to get in the cricket administration. I mean, I just sort of sidled into it almost and, enjoying it while I do it, but I never had any ambition to, in that way at all.
So it was just a natural thing that you sort of assumed the captaincy wherever you went?
Well, people elected me captain, yeah, and I accepted with alacrity. I mean, obviously, if you want to play the game in a certain way, then it's a tremendous advantage to be able to say to people, that's the way we're going to play, lads, sorry. And not quite if you don't like it, lump it, but, that's the way I'm going to do it, and if it's not what's required, then presumably they'll find somebody else.
How easy was it to go from the university side to a county side like Essex in those days?
Well, it was easy, very easy to go in and play. I mean, the Essex dressing room has always been a very good place, and I mean, there was never any acrimony whatsoever about an amateur or a young, whippersnapper coming in. They were all tremendous. It was difficult to take over as captain because when I did take over, it was in the middle of a season. We were at the bottom of the table where we stayed to the end of that season. I took over from Tom Pearce, who was getting on a bit, and, I was obviously sorry to take over from him. But we did finish bottom, and at the end of the season, we needed to do a considerable bit of pruning, and that was the difficult bit. I mean, I had to suggest that, 3 or 4 of the senior pros were past their best, and that didn't make me the most popular man for a while, anyway. So that bit was very difficult. And it was also not terribly easy to get some of the older guys, more staid in their ways, to enjoy and fall into things like fielding practice in the mornings and so on and so forth, which I, was very keen on. When we got a younger side, we became a very good fielding side. But other than that, from the personal point of view, Essex has always been a great place to play cricket.
Who were around at that time in the dressing room that you went into?
Well, Peter Smith, who was, he was in the in the touring side, the first touring side of the one, was a very good leg spin bowler, a very obvious googly that, we used to say the band used to stand up and play God Save the Queen as it came out of his hand, but he was a very good leg spin bowler, and on good wickets he was a very big wicket taker. Ray Smith, who was a marvellous Cavalier cricketer, bowled in swingers, often used to have to go round the wicket to, contain the swing. Bowled off spinners, took his sweater off and put his hat on, went on the other end. A tremendous hitter, a very good fielder, a great sportsman. Can't speak too highly of him. He was a lovely bloke to have around. Dickie Dodds, of course, who was one of the great entertainers. Went grey very early and looked old, but was always very lithe and a tremendous striker of the ball. Hit the first ball of the match for 6 on either 2 or 3 occasions when I was playing, and was mildly eccentric in some of his ways.
Did he go grey having to open the batting on those Essex pitches that you were mentioning?
Could be, but I don't think so. No, I think he went grey in the army in India. I do remember at the Oval we took a wicket, and Ken Preston was bowling. I was fielding first slip. Trevor Brady was second slip. He was bowling from the pavilion end, and Ken Barrington came in next, took guard, and played the first ball, bat and onto his pad down to fine leg, where Dodsey was fielding, where we thought Dodsey was fielding. So we looked round, there was no sign of Dickie. So we sort of tossed a coin, and I set off after him. Very long boundary down there because there were no ropes. And as I got to within about 20 yards of the concrete wall, the ball slowing down, Dickie Dodds came out jumping over the wall, having been to the loo and having taken some little more time than he thought might be possible. So we, met in mid-boundary, as it were. And he was, he had certain eccentricities, of which that might be called one. Also at the Oval, I do recall my worst piece of captaincy ever when Jeff Whittaker, who was a very big hitter, enormous hitter, skied Peter Smith, and Dick Horsfall was fielding at long on, and Dickie Dodds was fielding at long off, and I called Dick. And they met right in front of the pavilion gates, collided head on, the ball fell straight in between them. And I always called surnames after that, although, of course, we had 3 Smiths in the side at one time, so that made it a bit awkward.
He was also one of the earliest people to use a helmet, wasn't he, Dickie Dodds?
Well, in a sense, yes. I wrote something in the Essex history about it, which he, in fact, corrected me on. He put not the inside of a riding helmet, but the inside of a baseball hat into his cap, because he was occasionally getting hit on the nut, and it caused a bit of surprise once or twice when, particularly F.S. Truman, when he hit him once on the head and it went down for 4-leg buys, a bit sharpish. Yes, that was in the mid 50s, because he was I called him a compulsive hooker. He's denied that. I said, well, he never stood at the other end when he was batting if he denied that. But he used to hook half volleys pretty well, and so his nut was frequently in danger. But he was a tremendous entertainer.
So it meant that side in the 50s, with someone like him to lead the batting, and you to come a little bit later on, who also liked to get on with it a bit, cricket was never going to be dull watching Essex, was it?
Well, we couldn't really afford it to be, because we hadn't got a good enough side technically to hope to win very much. The News Chronicle started an entertaining batting competition, and we won it 3 years running, and they abandoned it. Dick Horsfall was also a very good striker of the ball, and the Smiths too. I mean, Peter Smith. We got the fastest 100 of the year, I think 7 years out of 9. Even a guy called Colin Griffiths, who was an amateur, came and got the fastest 100 of the season post at Tunbridge Wells one year. So we used to put the bat to the ball.
A weakness in bowling, though?
Yes, our main weakness was we never had a finger spinner who was really any good until the late 50s. I mean, finger spinners were essential. I mean, Yorkshire and Surrey, who were the 2 major sides, but both were absolutely stacked with them, and very good ones. Trevor was the mainstay of our bowling right the way through, and because he was playing quite a few Test matches. Ken Preston, England immediately after the war hadn't got a fast bowler at all. I mean, even up to and including 1950. I mean, John Waugh went as a fast bowler to Australia. Brian Statham was sent out as a replacement, and that was the first sign, really, of the sort of new wave. Statham, Truman, that one. But Ken was a really quick bowler, in 1948-9 who broke his leg playing football, and the thing didn't really mend properly, and he was unable to run up properly and bang his leg, bang his foot down. So he changed his method entirely. Over a couple of years, went into the second 11 and started bowling off cutters and leg cutters and a few swingers, and became a very fine bowler. And he was a tremendous pro, and he was our sort of second stalwart. Peter Smith and Ray Smith, of course, in the early days, bowled thousands of overs. I mean, 3,000 overs between them, more seasons than not. Both very good bowlers, but not necessarily match-winning bowlers. So we were really short of that sort of category of bowler. Roy Ralph came in a bit later on. He was a very useful swing bowler from club cricket who did rather better in first-class cricket than in club cricket because he tended to have his catches held, snicks and what have you.
He started off very late in life.
He did. He came into the side about 34, 35 even. And I think I would say I've alighted on him accidentally, actually, but he paid Essex cricket one of the greatest compliments that's been paid, because he came to the end of the first season in which he played a fair bit of cricket and said, did I think the club would employ him as a pro next year? Because he was playing as an amateur. And I said, I was quite sure they would. Any particular reason? He said, well, I may as well have the money because there's no great advantage to being an amateur in this side. And, that was an indication to me that all the guys at least felt they were getting an equal crack of the whip. Apart from anything else, we played a lot of amateurs, and I was most anxious, as was Trevor, to make sure that nobody felt they were coming in for the sake of coming in. And we were always anxious to play the best side, and so if we thought an amateur was better than a pro, we put the amateur in. But it was essential that he was there on equal terms with the pros and on no other terms, and that's what they all accepted.
You mentioned Trevor Bailey again then, and you said that your first association with him was at Cambridge University, and then your careers seemed to go together. You look at the record books, or certainly the Essex record books, and various wicket partnerships, Insole and Bailey, Bailey and Insole, right the way through. And I remember when I first started watching Essex, it seemed that Insole and Bailey stood out from the others because you used to wear MCC touring sweaters rather than the Essex sweater most of the time. Just how good a player was Trevor Bailey, and were you as close as the books would suggest?
Yeah, well, he was a very fine all-rounder. I would certainly, rank among the very best since the war. I haven't given any great thought, but I mean, Ian Botham was obviously a very great all-rounder and a different sort of all-rounder. But Trevor would rank with the best of our post-war all-rounders. His bowling was controlled. It was dangerous when he got any help from the wicket, and when he didn't, he used to put it there or thereabouts and niggle away. He was always a great spotter of people's weaknesses and strengths. I mean, that was his one of his great virtues to me as a captain, certainly. We used to consult a hell of a lot. He wasn't the greatest reader of a game at large, I would say, but in terms of the detail of it, he was very good indeed, tactically. As a batsman, he had a very good technique. He tended to be a one-pace player. There were numerous occasions with Essex when that was absolutely invaluable, when he would score runs in the middle of the order and everybody else would be getting out, and one would be very grateful for him there. He was quite capable of banging the ball around, but it seemed to take a change of mental attitude, a bit like Geoffrey Boycott. You tend to get into a frame of mind, they shall not pass, and once you're in that, then it's very difficult to alter it. But I used to not sort of make him go and sort of thrash around, but tell him that was expected of him, and he never really enjoyed that, but he'd always do it. He was in that sense, he was a very good team man. He used to moan after us, particularly if he got out. But we did actually, I think it's the only time it's been done, each score 100 before lunch in a match against Notts in 1950, whatever it was. He had the strokes, he just had to be brought out of him. Very useful fielder, excellent slip fielder. Never a great thrower, but a very safe pair of hands. He had small hands, which made it not that easy for him to catch skiers, but he was a very good instinctive slip fielder.
And brittle hands as well, didn't he?
Yeah, oh yes, they were bust with great regularity. And he, used to work very hard. I had one major upset with him only that I can remember in the years we were skippering, or when I was skippering, and that was in 1953. He was playing in the Leeds Test, and we were at the bottom of the table, and he rang from Leeds and said he was extremely tired and he thought he could do with 3 days off, and his wife Greta was up and he thought they'd sort of mosey down and he'd play on the Saturday. And I wasn't in favour of that at all. And so, and I think that I'd either just got out or I was about to go in, so I was feeling a bit tetchy anyway. So I said, well, it's just not on boil, and if you don't appear in the morning for my money, you can forget the rest of the season. And whether that would have ever come to anything, I don't know, but it was something that I said in the spur of the moment. Anyway, in the morning, there he was, and it was a bit tense and a bit taut. We didn't say too much to each other for a couple of days. But he got 70-odd not out in our innings against Somerset. And he got 4 for 30 in the first innings. And we made him follow on. And in the second innings, a lad came in, number 8, called Baker. And I don't know how often he played for Somerset, but anyway, Trevor bowled him out for naught for the second time. And having done that, and this was well into the second day, he came over to me and he said, if you told me he was playing, there'd have been no argument. And that was that. It was all forgotten, and away we went. And in fact, we won 6 of the next 8 games, which got us about 7 or 8 places up the table, which for us was quite a feat.
You said there a little slip of the tongue when we were captain. What was it? Very much a team effort, you and him.
Oh yes, it was very much a team effort. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt in my mind or in his who was to have the last word. But I mean, we consulted a lot. We shared rooms the whole time. We had a lot of common interests, and we were very close.
And a lot of fun together.
It was a very good, magnificent 10, 12 years. Yeah. It was in the end very unfortunate that he, as I think he now admits, went on a bit too long. And it was a great shame that, after all he'd done for Essex, people should have ever started to say, well, isn't it time he gave it away? And in the end, I was the guy who had to say, well, I'm afraid, next season we don't need you, which was a great sorrow to me and sort of ruptured things for a time. But anyway, we're still, we're good friends, see a lot of each other and so on and so forth.
That, of course, was a lot later on, but
yeah.
Back in 1950, when you took over the captaincy, as you say, bottom of the table, how did you go about getting a side together that could lift up and spent most of the next 10 years, at least in the upper half of the table, if not actually challenging for honours?
Yeah, we only really challenged for honours on a couple of occasions, but... well, as I said earlier, we needed to have some changes because there were some guys who really weren't good enough then anyway. One of those was Tom Wade, who had been a tremendous wicket-keeper. And it was very sad to have to say, well, I think we need another wicket-keeper. In the event, we got hold of Paul Gibb, and that was a tremendous coup, really, because he did us 6 or 7 years magnificent service.
You said Dickie Dodds was a bit of an eccentric, wasn't Paul Gibb as well?
Oh yes, he was. Yeah, yes, he was. A very stubborn man, extremely obstinate, but on the other hand, extremely pleasant. He was an enormous eater, as is well known. He was the sort of man whose van would break down the Blackmore Tunnel on a Saturday morning, or rather get a puncture, and he'd calmly get all his toolkit out and start mending it, and take him 35 minutes and have people threatening to beat him up and something, but completely unperturbed. And nobody wanted to travel with him in his van when we went on away fixtures because he used to do 28 miles an hour average, and if you were going to Swansea, you'd get there about 4 in the morning.
The other players in the side that you brought in, apart from Paul Gibb? Well,
mainly they were rather younger people. I mean, we had an established opening pair in Avery and Dodds. Dick Horsfall came in playing regularly. Paul Gibb batted number 4. I largely batted number 5. Trevor number 6. But we gradually tried to become a bit more athletic and energetic and virile. And the trouble with having long-serving members of the staff then, as it is now, who weren't quite up to it, they tend to go on playing and they tend to block out other people, and it's awfully difficult to hoik them out. If I can jump on a bit, Brian Taylor and Keith Fletcher and Graham Gooch have all been extremely good in bringing young people on and in. And that's quite unusual for professional cricketers. Or, yes, it's fairly unusual now for professional cricketers. It certainly was earlier on. And so if people are there, then they tend to play because they're there, and you need to have new blood and force new people in. I mean, you need, these days in particular, you need a bigger, much bigger squad, because you've got more competitions, different sorts of cricket to be played, different sorts of bowlers required, and so on and so forth. But in those days, playing championship cricket, which was not quite a stereotype, but it was the same day in, day out. You really needed to inject new blood regularly in order to keep things moving.
From what you were saying, that side in the 50s, the way they played, they were only playing championship cricket, but they'd have been ideal for a one-day competition, and had there been the one-day competitions around in the 50s, you might not have had to wait quite so long for that first honour.
No, I think our batting would have been ideal. Our bowling would have been a bit untidy. We'd have scored a lot of runs. We'd probably have a lot of runs scored against us. But we would all have enjoyed it, I'm sure. I mean, we used to play a fair bit of one-day sort of invitation 5 and 6-a-side cricket on Sundays for people's benefits and what have you. And used to thoroughly enjoy it and do it quite well, yeah. Right.
You did, in fact, play at the end of your career in a bit of Sunday stuff, didn't you?
Yes, if you've got an hour and a half, I'll tell you the story. It was in 1969, and I just finished being a selector. So I played a season's club cricket, and I was getting a few runs, and we only had 12 pros at that time. Keith Fletcher was going to play for England, and somebody was injured, so Brian Taylor said, would I play? And I said, no, and he said, well, come on, play, and I said, all right. And it was at Yeovil, against Somerset, obviously, and I set out at about 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning. I caught the 8 o'clock train, which was full of sailors from the Royal Tournament who were desperately hungover. I didn't get a seat. I couldn't get a taxi at Yeovil. I dragged my bag to the ground. I did my fielding practice. I wasn't the greatest batsman in the world, but I could play off spinners. I was down to about number 5 or 6. Brian Langford bowled 8 overs, 8 maidens, no runs, no wickets. The only time it's ever been done in the competition, and I was sitting there waiting to go in and hopefully belt him all around the ground. By the time he was off, the other sorts of bowlers were on. I said to Brian Taylor, there's not much point in my going in now, because you need someone to really card it all around the ground. He said, no, old son, you get in, you'll be marvellous, and all this jazz. Well, I was in there. Greg Chappell was bowling. Boycey was at the other end. I was dying to give Boycey the bowling. I played a couple of balls, played a third to square leg, called Boycey for a run. He sent me back. Langford hit one stump and I was run out for naught. We lost the match. I came home in a train full of people coming from the seaside. I put my bag down the corridor. One said, my son's very tired. Can you sit on your bag? I said, yes. And he weed all over it. I got back about midnight and home about 1 o'clock, and it was a great day. And as I keep telling Edwards, I still haven't had my expenses.
You weren't tempted to come back again after that?
Forget it, no. I was not.
But you also, throughout that time, were bringing new players in. I'm thinking of people like Gordon Barker came into the side to become a permanent fixture in the opening berth with Dickie Dodds.
Yeah, we went to see Gordon Barker, Trevor and I. We were playing up in Nottingham, I think, and his commanding officer was an Essex member and a big fan of Essex, and he said, there's a lad here you ought to see. We went over up into Yorkshire to see him play on a Sunday. He impressed us, and we offered him a try, and he came down to Clacton and played, I think, against Canada, although I could be wrong, and he got a naught in the first innings. in the 102nd, and we invited him to join the staff, and he came and joined us and was with us for a long time. And as most people know in Essex, he's been at Felsted for some time and has been producing us some very fine cricketers from there. Derek Pringle, John Stevenson, young Knight, and we have reason to be grateful to him.
Isn't that part of the character of Essex cricket, though, the continuity, that people do that, they get involved in Essex cricket and then stay involved?
Yeah, I hope so. We try very hard to keep them involved. I mean, I do believe, and I think most other people believe in the club, that you need the playing fraternity and you need the guys who've got their roots in order to keep the club going. Of course, you need the business side, you need the commercial side, you need every side you can get. But although cricket is a business, the business is cricket, so we try and keep people involved. We've got Graham Saville on the committee, David Ackfield on the committee, and we obviously hope and believe that the others will keep coming back whenever they can.
And yet you, and again, I think people tend to regard Essex cricket as being very much home-produced, but you pull them in from all over, like you just mentioned Gordon Barker that you brought down from Yorkshire, and Paul Gibb came from Yorkshire as well. So there is a wide variety of backgrounds that go to make up this side.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously we try as far as we can to produce our own players, and never more so than now. I mean, Fletcher's there in the second 11, and as we can talk a bit about him later on, but his aim is to produce young players from the Essex people that come into the side, and not to worry about results particularly, but to use all his wiles and skills to get people on. But gaps appear, and you just haven't got people to fill them. I mean, for example, when Raymond East retired, we only had one first-team spinner. That was David Ackfield. We need two spinners. Really, every side needs two. You don't need them all the time, but there are occasions when you need them. And if you're one spinner busts a thing, you've got now. So we went out for John Childs, who has been an enormous success. But yes, we've scouted around to fill holes where we've had holes, and don't think we've got people who are adequate within our own ranks. But I think, as far as is possible, we're bringing our own young guys on. I mean, currently we've had Shahid in the side this year and Nasser Hussain, and we've got others coming through. It'll come on.
Yeah, perhaps a bit wider afield than just Yorkshire and
too right. Yeah.
Karachi and Madras.
But we've been, because in the late 50s or the later 50s, Barry Knight came into the side, and he was a very fine cricketer. He departed, unfortunately, in the mid 60s when Brian Taylor was made captain. When Barry thought that he ought to have been captain, he went to Leicester, which was a great loss to us, because he was a hell of a good player, even though we thought he might not be the best captain, and certainly we were totally justified in Brian Taylor's performance because he was magnificent. But Barry was a very fine wanted player. But it was in the late 50s we started getting a couple of finger spinners, Alan Hurd and Paddy Phelan. And although they wouldn't claim to be the greatest bowlers in the world, at least they could bowl on the damp wickets and the turning wickets and make people think about it. And we started getting up to 5th and 6th in the table and beating good sides. We started beating Yorkshire, and we beat Surrey a few times, and so on and so on. And the standards started getting a bit better then.
But by the way of things, you could beat Yorkshire and Surrey, but we'll probably lose to Glamorgan and Derbyshire. Is that right?
Yeah, that was often the pattern, certainly. Yeah.
An unpredictability, a glorious unpredictability that again gave Essex cricket its appeal.
Well, yeah. It certainly appealed to me when I was young. I mean, I still remember very vividly the day we bowled Yorkshire out for 31. I remember cycling along Loughshall Road, Hymes Park, and shouting to a bloke we bowled him out for 31, and I was, whatever it was, 7 or 8 at the time. And, it was one of those joyous occasions. But yes, unpredictable we were until, the last 10 years when we've become much more stable.
Can you see, looking back, the seeds of recent success at that time?
The answer to that really is no. I mean, one always hoped for it, but we needed certain types of players, and until they came through, we were never going to be successful. I mean,
I'm
I don't
thinking
know.
though of attitudes and the way you played the game.
I've always thought that our attitude was right and good, without being pious about it. We were reckoning that it was a game for spectators as well as for us, and if we didn't enjoy it, they wouldn't. But I wouldn't be too pious about it, as I say, because we weren't in a position to slaughter people. So if people were going to watch us, they were going to watch us because we entertained them, not because we beat other people. People that come and watch winning sides. I mean, I always thought we were a much more entertaining side than some of those that were winning matches. But and over the years, Essex supporters have been enormously loyal. I mean, even when we were playing, pretty badly, they've stood by us very well. And there's an enormous enthusiasm in the county, which is extremely gratifying, from East Ham through to Frinton. So there is that extraordinary sort of... It's a sprawling county from the east end of London through to the sort of slightly toffee-nosed area. But there's a great unity, which I've always appreciated anyway.
You never looked at the more successful counties. Perhaps you'd just travelled back from Scarborough and you've been wiped off by Yorkshire, and you travelled back and you've got another game coming up, and you did never look and think, why didn't I play at the Oval when Surrey were having all that success and you were struggling?
Yeah. I can honestly say that I didn't. We often said that it was a better achievement to get Essex halfway up the table than it was for Surrey to win it. I mean, if Surrey hadn't won it with the players they'd got, then that would have been a sad reflection on them. But if we managed to get halfway up, then at least we'd not fulfilled our ambitions, because we were always fairly ambitious. And there was one season, 59, when we were top of the table until middle to end of June, and it was all systems go. And then we had our usual unpredictable 5 weeks without getting a single point, and we finished up somewhere halfway down the table again. But no, I've always enjoyed immensely the sort of atmosphere in Essex, which in fact allowed captains then, and still does, to get on with it. I mean, I did find that, to my surprise, that I was lumbered with all sorts of jobs, like paying the players and all this jazz, and organising transport and paying hotel bills, which I didn't mind doing in the least, but I was quite surprised that it wasn't being done by some administrative guy behind the scenes. And that was the way, and it's less the way now, but it certainly was when I was doing it.
I suppose in those days the county couldn't afford to have someone behind the scenes doing it, because you were never a wealthy county, were you?
No, right. And we got to a point in the mid-60s when we were pretty well bankrupt. And there was one year in particular which caused a real crisis, when we lost £9,000 on a turnover of 43,000. We used to run the club on £43,000, and 2 years after that, when we cut our staff down to 12, we in fact ran it on £33,000, the whole lot, the whole bang shoot, all the players' salaries, the secretaries' salaries, the lot. But looked at in today's terms, where we're turning over £1 million, I mean that's the equivalent of losing £200,000, and we were in a very bad way. So we were obliged to take very stringent measures in about 66, and that's in fact when we cut our staff to 12.
And that was when Brian Taylor came on the scene as captain.
Yeah,
Great competitor.
Oh yes, I mean he had, with the exception of Gordon Barker, a lot of young blokes, and the extraordinary lucky thing about those those 12 players, that at that time 6 of them were virtually unknowns, and they all became very, very competent cricketers. I mean, John Lever, Robin Holmes, Ray East, David Atfield, even Fletch, Stuart Turner. They were fit, they played every game, and they all became very good cricketers. And that's partly good judgment, but mostly it's luck. And Tonka, we felt, was the chap to lead them, because they needed a certain amount of discipline, and he was certainly a disciplinarian. He wouldn't claim to be the greatest tactician ever, but his heart was absolutely in the right place. And if you talk to these guys now, they will say that what a tremendous guy he was for them. And he started off, as one would expect, by being second from bottom of the table, and gradually we were helped by the one-day competitions coming in, because we were a very good one-day side. Keith Boyce, of course, Trevor had brought over, and he was a fabulous cricketer for Essex. I mean, a tremendous entertainer, but a very, very fine cricketer. And, we had a great fielding side and some useful bowlers and some explosive batting. And, in the one days we began to have some influence, although, as you know, until 1979 we didn't actually win anything.
You mentioned fielding and you mentioned discipline. Now, I know you were very hot on fielding and made sure that Essex were always a good fielding county. Where did you stand on discipline in your side?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very loose rein. There wasn't too much discipline required. I mean, there were occasions when it was. I remember having one big up and a downer with Gordon Barker when he was very openly critical on one occasion, and I said, out on the field, and I said, I can't have that, Bark. Off you go, and don't bother, turning up for the next 2 matches. And we went in the dressing room, and Dickie Dodds was the senior pro, and he came to me and said, "Are you, would you reconsider your decision?" And I said, "Well, only if I get an absolutely grovelling apology, because one simply can't have that sort of thing going on." So he said, "Well, I'm sure, Bark is extremely sorry." So I said, "Well, okay, wheel him in." So in came the great Bark and said his piece. And we went down to Somerset for the next match, and I haven't looked up the figures, but as I remember it, we were bowled out for 190, and he got about 120 of them. So it was just as well I changed my mind.
He would probably know.
Oh, yes, he would, exactly. Yeah.
After Brian Taylor, it was then Keith Fletcher's turn at the captaincy, and you were still involved in a position of power off the field at this time. But it must have been a great reward for you to see the progression through to a winning county.
Yeah, it's been extremely gratifying and very good fun. I mean, it's been surprising in a way, and it's been surprising in particular to find people doing it, day in and day out. But yes, I mean, it's just been extremely enjoyable and very satisfying.
But still very much in the Insole mould.
Well, yeah.
You probably won't admit this, but I mean, from talking to you and watching the team, it still appears that your stamp is very much there. As I went back to say a while ago, the seeds were probably sown in the 50s, and there has been a progression through.
Yes, I don't think that. I mean, I was certainly keener on fielding and a bit more disciplinarian than Tom Pearce, because when I came into the side, Tom was getting on. But in terms of, the sense of enjoying your cricket, that was very much Tom's philosophy. And he's been around as chairman and president since. And he sets the tone pretty well, and he has enormous respect from the guys. I mean, he doesn't turn up that often now, but he can say things in which nobody else can say, because they know damn well that, one, he's absolutely sincere, and two, they can't, get at him because he's 83 or whatever. But I mean, he certainly ran the side in a particular way, and if I took that, well, that's fine. But we have always said to the blokes, and I always said at the start of the season, nobody's ever going to criticise you if you lose trying to win, and nobody's ever going to criticise you if you're trying. But if you've got to employ gamesmanship or lose, then lose. And I hope by and large that's the philosophy. But Keith, of course, is developed, and it was a development, because he was a quite reserved, shy guy in his early days, and although he used to whisper in Tonka's ear a hell of a lot, it wasn't until he'd been skipper 2 or 3 years that he really came out of his shell and started exerting his authority. And he always had a tactical appreciation, which was very good. And, well, he was magic. I mean, a tremendous captain. Deserved much better things internationally.
I mentioned you played, 9 test matches, and they were spread over 5 different series. Kind of ever given you the feeling that you were established in the side?
No, Trivial Pursuits, who was the England player who played 4 times for England and was dropped every time. I mean, there's all this fuss goes on these days about dropping a bloke after one match. It happened to me 4 times. No, I mean, I don't want to be unduly modest, but I always felt I was quite fortunate to be picked. I mean, there was one year when I was getting loads of runs when I felt I was very unfortunate to be dropped. I think it was stupid to drop me, to be honest. I was in 55 against South Africa. But in my first match in 50, I created a change in the law. I was bowled out. I was dismissed by Ramadan in the first innings. And the ball spun back and hit my pads, and there was a yell for LBW. It went onto my wicket. And out I went, and as I turned around, Frank Chester was going over to the scoreboard and saying that wasn't bowled, it was LBW, because Ramadan appealed and I'd given him out before the ball hit the stumps, which was pretty lightning reflexes and all. And so the law was changed to say that if the ball hit the stumps, you're out bowled, whether it's at your pads or your box or whatever, whatever it's really well hit. So I was instrumental in the change in the law there. Ramadan was a menace as far as I was concerned. I played twice against the West Indies, and I think my top score was 21. I got 2 noughts, including the nought that allowed Peter Mann, Colin Cowdery to put on 5,734,000 at Birmingham in 1957. I was driving Freddie Truman from Droitwich to the ground, and he said, "Well, you'll get millions today, little lad." He said, "You'll get millions," and I thought, well, that's 1 and 6 noughts, and I certainly got 1 of the noughts on that day anyway. There was still, the rest still had to come. Yes, he was trying to bolster my confidence unsuccessfully.
You went to South Africa in 56, 57 as vice-captain to Peter May.
Yeah.
That was a happy tour for you?
Yes, it was very good fun. I mean, that was the only tour I went on. I was invited to go on 2 or 3 others. I was invited to skip the side to India in 51, 2, where it was, but I was working for George Wimpey at the time, and they said I should stay at home, and I didn't argue with that. I had a family by then anyway. I was quite happy not to go. But in this particular instance, MCC, who were at that time responsible for selection, were for some reason keen I should go as vice captain, and so they sought special permission from George Wimpey, and George Wimpey gave special permission, so I went. Yes, it was a very happy tour, very good fun. We had a good side. We only drew in the end 2-2, but it was thoroughly enjoyable.
And successful. You got your maiden and only Test 100 and Test 50 there as well.
Yeah, I had a good tour. I mean, I was top of the averages and played in all the Test matches and so on and so forth. I should say, got my only Test 100, which was a bit painstaking, but it was a backs-to-the-wall performance. And, yes, I was quite pleased with what happened there. I came back as an established member of the side, if you like, and I started off in 57 playing desperately badly. One of my problems always was that because I was working, I never practised. Just wasn't able to get a month off to practice. So the first match I went to was really almost my first net. And I started off very badly, and I remember phoning Gabby Allen and saying, if you're thinking of picking me, please don't, because I'm in no sort of nick. But they did, and that was the Edgbaston Test match that I've just talked about.
And of course, 3 Essex players on that tour to South Africa, the first time there had been 3 Essex players together in an England touring side.
Yes, Brian Taylor went as the sort of wicket-keeper batsman, and he got a few runs as well. But because Godfrey was the first keeper, but Tonga did all right. I mean, he didn't play in the Test match because Godfrey was fit, but he laid about him to very good effect on 1 or 2 occasions, and his voice was heard at High Commission garden parties with some, to some effect.
A great loss to the diplomatic corps, I did imagine.
Oh, yes, I remember somebody or other driving in a Rolls Royce. He had a couple, and I remember him saying, "Get off and milk it, mate," which was a good old-fashioned used to have expression. And because we had Harold Dalton on the tour as well, our famous physio, the Wuzzer, who was a bit of a figure of fun in some ways, but a very, very good physio. I remember we pulled up at the traffic lights, the three of us actually, in a car together by a church, and there in one of those display cases was a sermon on Sunday from H.W. Dalton, Healing Round the World. Took him a bit of time to forget that, I'll tell you. No, he really was quite good, and in that 54-5 tour in Australia, when he went as physio, and it was really the first time England had taken a proper physio, nobody missed a match through being unfit. And there were some pretty unfit guys on that. I mean, the Typhoon, Frank Tyson was liable to pull things, and Trevor, of course. So Len Hutton became one of his great fans because he kept everybody out there all the time.
You eventually decided to give up playing yourself. Was this because of pressure of business and selection duties?
Well, it was entirely pressure of business. I mean, they just said, that's enough, you know, you're 34, we need you, which was either flattering or not, whichever way you look at it. And so that was it. I wasn't unhappy to give up in many ways, because I was getting to a point where I was missing quite a few matches because I was selecting, and as I've said, I was working at the start of the season. So, well, you know, batting was becoming less easy, and so it was probably the right time to give it away. But I became a selector, I think, in '59, nominated by Surrey. Perhaps I was getting too many runs against Surrey, and they thought, well, they better miss a few. I better miss a few games. And so I continued doing that.
Did you enjoy that?
Yes, I did by and large. Not an easy job and quite responsible, but I had a very good lot of fellow selectors. Gubby Allen was chairman, and Wilf Wooler, and in my first year Herbert Sutcliffe, and then subsequently Willie Watson, Alec Bedser, and Walter Robbins became chairman in '61, and he was a very good friend and a tremendous performer.
It sounds to me as though there's some fairly strong characters in that selection lineup.
Yes, I mean, Gubby was completely in charge, but Wilf Wooler was a man of all sorts of ideas, some of them good, some of them horrendous, and you could always ignore the horrendous and accept the good. Alec Bedser was a very sound judge, not wildly enthusiastic, but you had to put 11 men in the field, so these are the best 11, and he's a very good judge of cricketer. Willie Watson, delightful bloke, and also a very good judge. And then we had Don Kenyon came in, Peter May. I became chairman in '65, I think. It was the custom then, and I think it's probably a good custom to go from one Australian series to another, that being the sort of point which was felt was crucial from English cricket's point of view. So you had to build up to an Australian series, and then you gave it away. And that's what I did, that's what Walter Robbins did, and that's what Cubby did. But certainly, Robbie was a very strong character, eccentric. He, on a couple of occasions, said, well, that's long enough, we've been 3 hours, so I'm going to the pictures, and off he went and left me to sort of sort out the last couple of places I want to have you. But he'd made his views pretty well known, so we knew what he wanted. And he was an advocate of lively cricket, not ridiculously profligate cricket, but lively cricket.
Just before we leave your playing career, you were also a bustling bowler, useful medium pacer, particularly as a change bowler.
Yes, I mean, all batsmen enjoy bowling, if you can call me a batsman. We had a lot of my sort of bowler. I mean, Ray Smith, Ken Preston, Roy Ralph, and the slightly. Obviously, Trevor was much quicker, but people like Jack Bailey was a good bit quicker as well. But we had lots of seamers, so the opportunities for going on weren't that many. I was really a sort of a stand breaker. I used to be able to swing it a bit. I mean, there were some people who used to talk out. I mean, I got Bill Edrich out, I know, 4 or 5 times, simply by because he was so scared to get out to me that he used to he was shaking down the other end. A few well-chosen words, and he didn't know where he was. But yes, I used to enjoy it immensely.
So where did these 6 stumpings in your career come?
Well, I kept wicket for a season for Cambridge University. I very foolishly volunteered in my first season while exams were on. Our wicket-keeper was not available, and I did it against Middlesex, and I didn't keep all that badly. And the next year, when we hadn't really got a keeper, they asked me to do it. And I absolutely hated it, really loathed it. My batting suffered as a result. But I wasn't a good keeper, and I used to feel very guilty about putting people down. And Bill Brown of Australia got over to, 220 or something against Cambridge at Finners. And I dropped him either 5 or 6 times from leg spinners, cutting and snicking, and down they went. And it was a nightmare. And I went over to the centenary test in '77, and I was at a cocktail party in the main room of the Melbourne Pavilion, and in came Bill Brown. He walked straight over to me and he said, "Doug, I haven't seen you for all these years, but I've never thanked you adequately for putting me down those times in 1948. And I said, "Christ, I stopped having nightmares about that, I thought, 20 years ago, but I shall have them again tonight." And I didn't enjoy it. But anyway, I did keep occasionally afterwards when Essex were desperately pushed. And I kept in that match at Chesterfield when we had that record last wicket stand between Peter Smith and Frank Viger. And I think I got a couple of stumpings then, so that's where they came from. But I wouldn't ever pretend to be anything more than a stopgap keeper.
When you finished playing, you went into selection, although you were in fact involved in test selection while you were still playing. Then you became a full-time administrator, in as much that you were a full-time player, I suppose, because you were still continuing your business career outside administration. How easy was that? Because cricket was becoming more and more of a full-time occupation, even on the administration side, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it became very, very difficult. I mean, I used to spend, realistically, I suppose, best part of a day a week on cricket administration, either as chairman of cricket or, involved with Essex and so on and so forth. And my employers were aware of that, and they were prepared to stand it. And I changed jobs in '75, and my new employer said to me, "Well, how much time does cricket take up?" And I said, "Well, between half a day and a day of your time." He said, "Well, that's okay." But then I was invited to become chairman of the board, and shortly after that, Packer arrived on the scene, and that involved an enormous amount of time, and 5 weeks in court and all this jazz. And so I just had to give it away because it was impossible, and it has become more and more difficult for people involved in other work to do it. And I certainly advocated when I was in office and when I left office that we needed really a full-time, or at least, if not a full-time, a non-executive chairman who was paid for the job, who was available when required. That's the thing, because you never know when things are going to, you can sail along with a series of meetings, that all looks hunky-dory, and then all of a sudden some crisis arises out of the blue, which is very time-consuming. I mean, it's amazing what a high-profile cricket's got, and South Africa, or the Indian thing, or Pakistan, or Packer, or any of these things, and all of a sudden you're in it, sort of pretty well full-time, interviews and talking to high commissioners and politicians and God knows what. So it's not really predictable, and you need somebody, I said, and I still believe, whose job it is, even if it's not a full-time job.
Is that a job that you would like?
No, it isn't. No, I've even if I were invited to do it, which would be very unlikely, I've done my whack. I'm more than happy to sort of bow out, really. I enjoy my involvement with Essex very much indeed, but even then, I think you need somebody sort of coming through to take over. I mean, I'll always, I hope, be. Well, I should definitely always be very interested, and I should be around as long as people want me. But I've got no ambitions at all as regards cricket administration.
But you still do get involved, because even recently with the South African business in ICC, you were one of the negotiators, were you not? Who brought up the peace policy.
Well, I'm chairman of the board's international committee, and that's something that I said I would do. It's a small committee, and really, because I've been around so long and know the people and know what's gone before, it's reasonably sensible that I should do it. And therefore I get involved in ICC because the international committee is the principal one involved in that side of the thing. The political side of it, I mean, it's become very political, and the international side of it is not that much fun, to be honest. There's a lot of politics, and there's a lot of colour, and it's not terribly recreational. But I feel I'm doing something fairly useful when other people think I'm doing it usefully.
You said right back at the start when we began talking that you were pushed into captaincy. They asked you to do the captaincy. You're now talking about being pushed into administrative posts and being asked to do this and asked to do that. Is there anything that you set your sights on in the sporting world or anywhere else comes back? I want to do that. You've made sure that you've gone and got it for yourself rather than being pushed into it.
Well, I was quite keen to manage a side or two overseas before I packed up, because it's a tremendous experience. Two, because if you haven't sort of gone through a complete series with a side overseas, then you've missed out a big part of sort of cricketing life. So that I was keen to do, and the first time I did it, it was reasonably appropriate that I should, because it was during the Packer era, and I've been involved in the Packer thing all through, and we were anxious to try and hold our people together. And in fact, in that thing, we only lost 5 of our players, whereas all the other countries, virtually lost a lot. And so that was a bit of a sort of rearguard action out in Australia. But it was also tremendous fun with a very good lot of blokes, and I enjoyed it immensely, although it was the hardest work I've done, I think. So that was something that I wanted to do, and I wanted to be involved with Essex, certainly. I'm not saying I didn't want to do the other things. What I'm saying is I was never sort of obviously or ambitiously sticking myself forward, and I've been quite happy not to. There was one job I pushed myself a bit to take because, and I'm not going to tell you what it was, because the guy that was going to get it if I didn't, I thought would be a near disaster, and so I didn't sort of demur when people said, well, will you have a go? But I'm not saying I haven't enjoyed it, which I have, immensely, but I never set out to get myself involved to that extent. And to be honest, the days I've enjoyed recently most have been sitting behind the bowler's arm at Chelmsford talking to Frank Wrist or Fletcher or somebody, not having people come out and saying that catering's bloody awful, or why did so-and-so do so-and-so, why don't we get ourselves a decent off-spinner? It's nice to relax and watch cricket, which is what I'm looking forward to doing in my older age, which isn't so far off, I must say.
What about those tours? I mean, you did 2 tours to Australia, didn't you?
I did.
You said they were fun and they were hard work.
Yeah.
What sort of people did you have around you, and the sort of people you came up against? I mean, did you have to... Was the hard work sort of negotiating the best position for the England party, or...?
No, I think you do as much as a tour manager as you think you ought to, and as far as I was concerned, and as far as most of them, it's a 24-hour-a-day job. I mean, you get, particularly in Australia, people here don't seem to know there's a time differential, and you're up early in the morning doing interviews and or sort of carting people around, and people are knocking on your door at 1:30 in the morning, pouring out their troubles to you. And in the second tour, certainly, there was a hell of a lot of press and social involvement. Ian Botham was around, and there were a lot of journalists who weren't vaguely interested in cricket, who were, who were looking for things, and everyone spent a lot of time, keeping the blokes out of trouble, as it were. And also, that was much harder work because we were losing then, and when you're losing, people are always much more, looking at you much more critically. And I remember saying to our blokes when we were 2-0 down, we were going to the Melbourne Test, which was the 4th one. There's a big lounge in the Hilton Hotel, and I said, "Get out! You'll be out of that lounge by 10 o'clock. If you want to stay up, do what you really like. It's up to you, but get out of there because everybody's in there, and they'll all be, saying that you're staying up late and drinking and so on and so forth. And a couple of the guys said, well, what's the form, manager? We don't drink. And I said, well, if you're drinking a tonic, they'll say it's gin and tonic. And if you're drinking tomato juice, they'll say it's a Bloody Mary. So get out and don't give people the chance. And they did get out, and in fact, by a piece of very good fortune, we won that match by a couple of runs. But I mean, you have to watch those angles. I remember one of our players was very upset that he'd been criticised by a couple of journalists when he got a low score for a rash, irresponsible stroke, when in fact all he'd done was to play forward and get an outside edge. And I was talking to a senior member of the press gang about that and saying how upset he was, and he said to me, well, you know why? And I said, no, I don't. He said, well, he didn't say hello to anybody in the lift this morning, or the morning. I said, you're not seriously saying that that's a, oh, I said, well, it's human nature, isn't it? And I said, well, not for me, it's not. But I mean, you've got to be on the key beat the whole time. So those are the bits of it that make it, apart from watching cricket, I mean, if you're involved, it's amazing how, if you're involved as a selector or manager, you live every ball. And the minute that responsibility's gone off you, you become just an interested spectator again. Perhaps an acutely interested spectator, but you don't have the sort of gnawing away. I mean, you bat for them all, you bowl for them all, you field for them all. And it's a very involved job.
Even more involvement than when you were captain?
Certainly no less, I would say. Certainly no less. Yeah.
Outside the game, you've had a career in the construction industry, which has obviously meant a lot to you because as you said, you gave up the chance of captaining England to pursue a career. How have the two dovetailed?
Well, I would think they've woven in pretty well. I mean, I started off, I had no intention, when I was at Cambridge, of going into the construction industry. I was invited in by as a senior executive at Wimpey's for a reason I still don't know. But it was at a time when I had a terrible season in 1948. I mean, I hadn't got any runs or anything, so there was no question of he's a young cricketer who's going to do something. And it wasn't until I got into Wimpey's, in fact, that they suggested I might have to carry on playing for a few years.
So you were close to actually giving up the game when you left Cambridge?
Well, from the first class point of view, I was more intent on getting a job than I was, going on playing cricket. I mean, if they'd said to me, you don't play cricket, then I wouldn't have played cricket, except perhaps in my holidays. And then it's very, very difficult to play on your holidays because you can't, particularly when you're an orthodox player, because you need to keep playing to keep going. Looking back, I mean, it seems ridiculous that I was an amateur. I mean, I had a young family. I wasn't earning a great deal of money. I mean, I wasn't poor, but I mean, I was earning nothing for doing what other guys were getting more than I was earning at Wimpey's, and it rankled a bit at the time with a couple of guys. I thought, well, these chaps around here doing that, they're earning more for what they're doing than I'm getting for 12 months' work. But looking back on it, it does seem ridiculous that one should have ploughed away playing for nothing when, it's right if you got loads of money, but I hadn't. So, but amateur status was, well, in my situation, I was unable to do anything else because I had an employer who wanted me to be at his beck and call if he wanted me, and he couldn't be under contract to two people. So,
were you in any way instrumental in getting the distinction between amateurs and professionals abolished?
Yes, I was involved on the committee and so on and so forth. But I mean, I was involved with the difficulties that were arising because there were a lot of assistant secretaries who really were cricketers, and it was causing a bit of friction, and it was time that it went. I'm not sure that the friction wasn't worth it. I mean, I think the game's lost a lot by the loss of the amateur. I mean, there was a degree of independence. I mean, in my own case, I could, I was very keen to play for Essex. But if they didn't like what I was doing, I was quite happy to say, well, forget it. I'll go and play for Middlesex. I won't play for anybody. And so one was able to have some sort of influence in that way. And in Essex, certainly the captains have continued to have influence. That's because they've been the right sort of personalities, and because people feel that's the way they want it to go. And if they don't perform right, we can always take them off it. But there was a great deal of handcuffing around the place, where people feel they're playing for their places and playing for their jobs and so on and so forth, which wasn't there when the amateur was there.
You also had a distinguished career as an amateur footballer. I mean, you played in the Amateur Cup final in 55-56 for Corinthian Casuals. That seems to me to be an ideal team for you, Corinthian Casuals.
Well, it was hardly a distinguished career. I mean, I was a better footballer when I was at school than I was a cricketer, but my football, I was what one might call a useful amateur footballer. I played a bit in pro football.
With Southend?
Yeah, played for Southend a bit, but that was only midweek. I played football, in fact, till I was 50-odd. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it was very good exercise. But it was great fun playing for the Casuals, because we were that. We came from all over the place. We did our own washing. We bought our own kit, and we enjoyed playing as a side.
I suppose that in those days the home ground was the Oval, was it?
Yes, for quite a bit of the time it was. Yeah. Yes, I was involved in that happening. Brian Caster was the secretary there, and we were playing on the Chiswick Polytechnic ground and having to share it with somebody else. And I said to him, the Oval's doing nothing during the winter. What about it? And he pushed it very hard, and so we got there. And for a few years, it was a very successful time for the club.
And in the middle 50s, Amateur Cup finals were watched by 100,000 people.
Certainly, some of them were. There were 85,000 at our cup final, yeah. And Pegasus Bishop Auckland was 100,000. It was just a different scene entirely.
And DJ Insole wearing the number 7 shirt, ploughing up and down the right wing.
Yes, ploughing being the operative word, I think.
And you've got another interest outside cricket and work, and that's jazz, I believe.
Yeah, I listened to a lot of jazz. I was very keen when I was young. I was at school with John Dankworth. We were exact contemporaries. We started the school jazz club, and I've always been interested. But obviously, when you get married and you're unable to spend late evenings and late nights around Soho listening to jazz. But
probably not the best preparation for a cricket match, either.
No, right. But the last few years, last 7 or 8 years, I've been rekindling my interest, and I go 1.5, 2 nights a week, and I just find it very relaxing. I enjoy it very much, and the blokes that are involved are very, very good fun. So it's a way of passing time in a very pleasant way.
You mentioned when you retire that is from commercial life.
Yeah.
You've got no intentions of moving out of cricket?
No. I mean, I'll hope to be interested in cricket, for as long as everybody wants me to be interested in cricket. But I do think, seriously, without any sort of stupidly false modesty, that you do need. If somebody's been in a job for a while, he can get stereotyped, he can get stale, and you simply need new blokes to come through. So I am earnestly hoping that we are going to get that in Essex and in other places. Graham Saville's taken over as chairman of cricket, and we've got some young guys. Ackers is on the committee. I hope we should find 1 or 2 more to come on and follow the tradition through.
Did you ever find a conflict being involved with the administration of the wider game with TCCB and what have you, as opposed to administration with Essex?
I must say I've never found it more taxing than this season. I mean, I haven't exactly enjoyed having 25 points taken off us and being up before disciplinary committee and all that sort of jazz. I mean, those are aspects of a chairman. I mean, the chairman of Essex is as big a job as you want to make it. Well, I am extremely fortunate. We're extremely fortunate. We've got a very, very good administrators. I mean, Peter Edwards is extremely good, and he's got a very good staff. And so my involvement with him most of the time is, over the phone every day. And, obviously I attend most of the meetings I'm required to attend. That's in the winter months. But there are other things that you get involved with inter alia almost, and, thinking of supporting people at disciplinary hearings and so on and so forth. And being up there yourself is another aspect of the thing which, I didn't find very happy or very easy. In the general sense, when I was a selector, I didn't really watch Essex that much because I was familiar, and it was up to other people to go and see them and decide who was doing what. But no, I mean, one has to try to be not too parochial. That's all. All the TCCB administrators have been chairman of county. Cecil Parris was the first one. I was the second, and Charlie Palmer, George Mann, and now Rahman. The big change is obviously on the commercial side. When I was chairman, we got the Cornhill sponsorship for test matches, and that was done actually by a ring around. I mean, that was extraordinary. I mean, Packer came on the scene. Really, up until 1975, there'd been not much money coming into cricket. But that 74-5 series in Australia kindled interest. The Australian side packed the grounds, and for the first time, and there was major money coming in from Australian television. There was money about right in the middle of a wage freeze. It was 4%. And Packer came in, and there was big money around. The only way we could get players' money up was, in fact, to get a sponsor. And so we did that, 3 or 4 of us, and the people involved, Cornhill, wanted a decision very quick before the end of the season in order to publicise it. And so it was really done on a sort of ring around. But the whole subject of commercialism in cricket is a very interesting one. It's a very delicate balance, and I'm, as I may have said earlier, cricket's a business, but the business is cricket, and it can very easily get taken over. There's some people who think we've gone a bit too far in Essex. I think we've managed to hold the balance fairly well. Peter Edwards is very good commercially, but it's still a game. So we still try to make it look like a cricket ground, and our sweaters have still got the old 3 scimitars or whatever they are on them, and we try not to make it too overtly commercial while welcoming everybody that's prepared to become involved with us. And the nice thing is that most of the people that are involved with us commercially prefer it that way. So, but cricket's obviously going more and more commercial. There's pressures the whole time for badges on England sweaters, and the England team to be called something or other, and coloured clothing to, just bring people in the grounds we've been trying to keep out for the last 30 years. It's a question of holding a balance, making the game viable, but still making it enough of a game to make people want to be associated with it.
It seems strange to me that Essex, when you started, were very much an amateur county, weren't they? And yet here they are now at the forefront of the commercial revolution, albeit in the nicest possible way.
Well, funnily enough, when I started, we were the only side that had sponsored lunches, and the captain had to go and sit with the day's sponsor at lunch, pads on the lot, and make polite conversation for 40 minutes and wait for the bell to go and then dash off. We were actually in the forefront of that on all our festival grounds, and we had no ground of our own, as you know. We didn't buy Chelmsford until the late 60s. We played on 8 different grounds. One of them, Westcliff, hadn't got a toilet. We used to have to go outside the grounds through the old wooden fence to literally spend a penny. But we used to sit with the mayor or whoever it was that was sponsoring through lunch. And but yes, I mean, since then the whole thing's become much more commercial.
Yes, it was in the mid-50s that I first started watching Essex, and I could never understand what that host for the day line on the scorecard was. And that's what it was.
That was it. Yeah, somebody used to buy the lunches and buy the teas, And that was a major contribution. I mean, as I say, as recently as 20 years ago, our total budget was 33,000 for everything and everybody. And it's now, well over $1 million.
Do you think commercialism in cricket is getting out of hand?
No, I don't, but I think it could, and I think it might fairly soon. I mean, I think I haven't any real doubt that eventually we're all going to be playing on artificial wickets with artificial outfields, and the ground's going to be used for other things and so on and so forth, and that's maybe inevitable, but I hope it doesn't happen while I'm around. Cricket grounds are an anachronism, but I hope and believe that members of clubs will want them to be that. I mean, if Lord's is an enormous piece of real estate, and you could easily, make it into a super stadium, but it wouldn't be Lord's. And people say, well, isn't it absolutely balmy to have that area of land which is only being used 2% of the year, probably, when you take out, when you literally take the hours and the rain. But it has to be an anachronism, or just totally commercial. I'm foolish enough to hope that we shall be able to go on calling England England and not somebody's England, and on a silly thing like Essex sweaters, I personally feel that Essex sweaters are Essex sweaters, and we don't want anybody else on them. All right, so we have a badge on the shirt, and that's fair enough, because anybody has those. But if you get an Essex sweater and you win it, then stupid it may be, but in my view, that's what it ought to be. We could get some more money. We don't necessarily need it that badly, so let's do without it while we can, say I.
And you're optimistic about the future of the game, or just a wee bit worried then that there might be artificial pitches, artificial outfields, too much commercialisation?
Well, I mean, I think, by the time that comes in, it'll probably be the norm. I mean, when talk about Wimbledon, how long is that going to hold out? I'm concerned about the future of the game in that in my opinion, the overwhelmingly potent reason for our lack of success at the moment is the lack of talent coming in at the bottom end of the game. You can talk about all the other things, and they all may have an influence, but they all pale into total insignificance behind the fact that there's very few schools playing. You're fighting for the interest of young people. I'm on the FA Council. They talk there about market share. Market share being the kids that play football. And you try to keep them occupied with football through the summer at fun weeks and coaching, so we don't go into cricket and think about it. And we've got to grab young people that show interest and convince them it's the greatest game, and that we've got a tremendous amount of interest in them, and that they have a great future in it, because it's become very competitive. I mean, it used to be a question of you play football, you play cricket. I mean, when I played for Essex in London, 6 of the guys who played in the football team played in the cricket team, and we undoubtedly in cricket had a tremendous loss when the maximum wage went under football, because there were 50-odd footballers playing first-class cricket then. Now they all play football because the money's there, and there were, some sides had 5 and 6 of them. But the big concern is that we do contrive to grab the young players and turn them into very good cricketers. Certainly, from our own point of view, Raymond East is dealing with schools cricket and spotting talent there. Fletcher in the second 11 has taken the job on with enormous enthusiasm, and we've said we're not interested in results. We're not interested in playing a second 11. 29-year-olds is going to win matches. We want young blokes coming through, and you telling him how to come through. And he's doing a marvellous job. I mean, and he's pushing the guys that are young as well. And so, one hopes it in that way. But I mentioned Phelps. I mean, if you look at our young cricketers now in Essex, and you think of Nasser Hussain, and you think of Shahid, and then John Stevenson, Nick Knight. They're all public school boys. I mean, I'm not suggesting that all our players are public school boys, but the proportion is far higher because they play, because they play cricket. My grandson plays in Waltham Forest, and I think Waltham Forest has turned out probably 4 or 5 Test cricketers since the war. Grangridge, certainly. Robin Hobbs, myself. One other. There's 4 schools playing now, and that's the real. The game itself, in terms of interest, is in tremendous shape. I mean, Gates are good at the moment. The phone-in interest is enormous, and there are more people playing, but they're playing it casually. And there's lots of casual cricket going on in warehouses and sheds and all this sort of thing. But the clubs again are in fact doing a tremendous job. I mean, they're all having to run coaching 3 nights a week, but they have 50 or 60 kids there, and you can give them 5 minutes batting or 5 minutes bowling, or you have a 10-over match. It's nothing like the same as playing a couple of school matches a week. So that's the real worry, being able to organise the game so that we pick up and nurture the young people in the game that are prepared to play it.
You've been very influential in taking Essex from a middle-of-the-table side, a bottom-of-the-table side, to being the most successful county in the land. Are they going to stay in that position?
Well, who can say? I mean, the material's there. We are short of bowling, there's no question about that. But the material at the moment is there. I mean, we've had a tremendous season in 1989. Desperately unlucky not to win more than the Refuge Assurance Cup. Won the 25 points, but it wasn't only the 25 points. It was the knock that it gave to the guys, and they just felt, well, is the game worth playing? Can this happen in English cricket? I mean, there was all that bit. I mean, however unjustified it may be, for about 3 matches they couldn't play at all, and then they came back. They scraped a draw against Worcester, and they were back on the road again. And but yes, it's all there, and I'm happy that we should be there or thereabouts in the foreseeable future anyway.
I said that you've been very influential. Do you take a great personal satisfaction from the success?
Well, I'd be stupid if I didn't say yes, but on the other hand, again, it's difficult to say this without sounding horribly pious. I've always felt it's a members' club. I mean, the members were always very good to me when I was captain, and when I was captain, because there weren't so many members, I knew most of them. And the part I enjoy still most about Essex is the sort of congeniality of it. If you get congeniality with success, that's absolutely superb. But the great enjoyment of it is really the involvement. I mean, I'm absolutely delighted that we're doing well, and particularly for the blokes, because we have had, as I hope you'll agree, a tremendous bunch of blokes over the years, and we've consciously not taken people that we thought would upset the atmosphere, and we've had, without being too specific, quite a lot of people that have asked to come. And when you get in a position where you're winning and people seem to be enjoying it, then obviously people do want to come. And where we felt that they might not fit in awfully well, we've said no, thank you very much. And the involvement with the blokes and the way they play it is a great enjoyment, certainly.
Any regrets in your career in cricket?
Well, if you've got about 3 hours, yes, I could name. They'd be mostly personal regrets of not having done better here or not having done better there, or those sorts of things, rather than major things that have gone cataclysmically wrong. It's a difficult question, really. I've regretted having to do a number of things, but I haven't necessarily felt that it was wrong to do them, and in many cases I was required to do them anyway. It was very, very difficult to reduce the Essex staff from 24 to 12. I mean, that was horrible. And you get a guy like Frank Wrist, who's an absolutely marvellous bloke, and who eventually worked for us for nothing pretty well. But having to say to him, well, I'm sorry, Frank, we just haven't got any money, so we can't have a coach. I mean, if you're prepared to do it, then we'll pay your expenses and so on and so forth, but that's the best we can do. And he did that for a couple of years. But, so one regrets having to do those things. I regret, obvious things like having to drop Ken Barrington for scoring a slow 100, having to tell him, lovely bloke, and we were great friends. We remain great friends, but in that situation, if you feel a bloke's not doing it, you've got to do something about it, and that's not easy. And similarly, Geoffrey Boycott, actually, I mean, as the sort of chairman of selectors, you become involved with your players inevitably, and if you have to do something of that sort, which is obviously going to hurt them, it's something that you regret having to do, but you don't necessarily feel it's wrong to do it. It's just something that has to be done.
Has to be done. Lots of things that you've talked about your career, you said that you've been pushed into, or you felt that you had to do it. I think it's been jolly good for Essex cricket in general, that you were prepared to be pushed into the positions that you have been, and that you've continued to take such a close interest in the game. And thanks very much for talking to us.
Well, that's very generous. I don't deserve it, but it's been good fun. Thank you.